Hello and welcome to this video. This is for Essential Math 40S students in the Geometry and Trigonometry unit who are looking at quadrilaterals. One of the main questions they'll ask you about quadrilaterals on a test or an exam is they'll show you two quadrilaterals and ask about similarities and differences between the quadrilaterals. So I'm going to go through all the different pairings of these 5 quadrilaterals, the 5 that you're looking at in your course. Trapezoid, rectangle, parallelogram, square, and rhombus. And as I go from slide to slide, we'll talk about the similarities and differences between these shapes. You might want to get prepared to pause this video, rewind it a bit. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking about similarities and differences. If you don't catch it or you'd like to hear it again, just rewind the video a little bit. Okay, we're looking at 10 actually different pairings, so here we go. The first one, trapezoid versus rectangle. The first similarity is that they're both four-sided shapes. Any quadrilateral is a four-sided shape, so it has that similarity. Another similarity between a trapezoid and a rectangle is they both have diagonals that are of equal length. A diagonal in a quadrilateral is an imaginary line that goes from one corner to the opposite corner. In both a trapezoid and a rectangle, they would have equal length diagonals. However, neither one of them would have 90-degree, their diagonals would not meet at 90 degrees. A difference between trapezoids and rectangles is that a rectangle has 2 sets of parallel sides. The sides are parallel, top and bottom's parallel, whereas the trapezoid only has 1 set of parallel sides. Another difference is that the rectangle has corners that all meet at 90 degrees, and the trapezoid does not. Next, we'll look at trapezoid versus parallelogram. A similarity again is that they both have 4 sides. That's getting close to where the similarities end. They also their corner angles are both not 90 degrees. Differences are, a parallelogram again has 2 pairs of parallel sides, whereas a trapezoid only has 1 pair of sides that are parallel. In a trapezoid, your diagonals would be of equal length to one another, but in a parallelogram they would not. This would be the longer diagonal and this would be the shorter diagonal. Again, their diagonals would not meet at a 90-degree angle, so that's a similarity. In a trapezoid versus a square, they're both four-sided. You're going to get tired of hearing me say that. They both have diagonals that are of equal length. That's a similarity. That's about where the similarities end. In a square, your diagonals are going to meet at 90-degree angles, whereas in a trapezoid, they are not. In a square, your corners are 90-degree angles, whereas in a trapezoid, they are not. That's another difference that you'd see in there. A square has all 4 sides the same length, and a trapezoid does not. For a trapezoid versus a rhombus is just a parallelogram that has 4 equal sides. So it's the same thing, just as a trapezoid and a square have similar similarities and differences to a trapezoid and a rectangle. Same thing here. They both have 4 sides. A rhombus has 2 pairs of equal sides, whereas a trapezoid does not. A rhombus has diagonals that are not equal length, whereas a trapezoid has diagonals that are the same length as one another. Neither one of them are going to have diagonals that meet at a 90-degree angle. And another similarity is their corners would not be 90-degree angles either. When we look at a rectangle versus a parallelogram, for similarities, they both have 4 sides. They both have 2 pairs of parallel sides. Opposite sides are parallel in both of these things. That's about where the similarities end. A rectangle has equal length diagonals, whereas a parallelogram does not. So the diagonals here would not be the same length. If you're ever trying to figure that out on a test, draw yourself an extreme parallelogram and just ask yourself if those 2 lines would be the same length. Okay. In a rectangle, the two diagonals do not meet at a right angle. Same with a parallelogram, they don't meet. But in a rectangle, the corners are all 90 degrees, whereas in a parallelogram, they are not. For rectangle versus square, I'm going to focus on the two differences. You can see the similarities, I'm sure, by now. A square has diagonals that meet at a 90-degree angle, and a rectangle, they don't. That's one of the main differences there that you're going to see with a rectangle and a square. The other big difference is a square has four sides that are the same, and a rectangle only has two pairs of sides that are the same length. For a rectangle versus a rhombus, they both have four sides. However, the corners in a rectangle are 90-degree angles, in a rhombus they are not. The diagonals in a rectangle are the same length, whereas in a rhombus they are not. They do have two pairs of sides that are parallel, so that's the same, but in a rhombus all four sides are of equal length, and in a rectangle they are not. In a parallelogram versus a square has two diagonals of equal length. Parallelogram does not. In a square, the diagonals meet at a 90-degree angle. In a parallelogram, they do not. A square, all four sides are the same length. In a parallelogram, they are not. They do both have pairs of sides that are parallel, so that's a similarity. In a square, they have 90-degree corners, whereas in a parallelogram, it does not. And then the last two I just do on the same slide here. So parallelogram versus rhombus, very similar. Okay, the main difference you're going to find between these two shapes is that a rhombus has all four sides the same length, and a parallelogram, all four sides are not the same length. Everything else about these two things is similar. They have diagonals of not equal length. They don't have 90-degree angles in the corner. The diagonals don't meet at a 90-degree angle. Okay, all of that's the same between these two things. And then a square and a rhombus, the big differences between a square and a rhombus, they're both four-sided shapes. They both have all four sides equal. A rhombus is just a tilty over square. The main differences being a square has a 90-degree angle and a rhombus does not. And a square has diagonals that are the same length and a rhombus does not. And in a square, the diagonals meet at a 90-degree angle, and in a rhombus, they do not. You don't necessarily have to memorize every single fact in this video, but be prepared on a test to discuss a similarity, one similarity and one difference between any of these two shapes that they might decide to show you. Again, feel free to work backwards and forwards through this video to kind of look at all the different similarities and differences. Thanks for watching.